Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message
On the book of Romans with Dan Irvin.
Well, if you would walk up and down the street and ask strangers what they thought, who should get in to heaven? Assume there's a heaven. Who do you think should get in? Well, you'd probably get a number of different responses. I would assume that most of them would be something like this. Well, heaven should be for the people who have tried, who have made a great effort, who have believed in God. Heaven is for people who are doing more good things than bad things. And what we've been looking at in Romans 4 this week is Paul saying quite the opposite. He's saying that none of us are deserving of God's grace, of heaven, of the promise of eternity, but God in his graciousness has gifted it to us. It's not a promise, a reward for good behavior, but it's something that God does because it's who he is. And in verse 13, we see again that promise as Paul writes about Abraham and continues. He writes in verse 13, "It was not through the law that Abraham and his offspring received the promise that he would be the heir of the world, but through the righteousness that comes by faith." Through the righteousness that comes by faith, not through the law. God did not say if you obey the law perfectly, then you'll have it. But he said he came with a promise and he invited Abraham to trust in him. You see, Paul understands something about the law that is important here, that the law is a good thing. It's the perfect thing. It's holy. The law was never designed to create this feeling of hopelessness. The law was designed to create hope. But verse 14 and 15, Paul writes and continues, and it's plain to see, "For if those who depend on the law are heirs, faith means nothing, and the promise is worthless, because the law brings wrath. And where there is no law, there is no transgression." The law brings wrath, not because the law is bad, but because we are. The law shows us what God truly requires of us, his standard. And it gives us no power to meet that requirement. It offers us no mercy when we fall short, the law in it of itself. You'd almost say the law is like looking in a mirror. You know, you can look in a mirror and you can see that your face is dirty. You can see that your clothes are ripped, but the mirror cannot do anything about your dirty face or your ripped clothes. In fact, the clearer the mirror, the cleaner the mirror, the more you can see, the more you can tell, perhaps the more uncomfortable you feel. And Paul is saying here that if our inheritance depended on keeping the law, verse 14, then faith is emptied of its meaning and the promise is nullified. Why? Because no one can ever be sure that they've done enough. That's the problem with basing our relationship with God on how we think we're doing. It never produces peace. It only produces one of two things, anxiety or pride. Maybe you've felt this. Either you're proud because you think, okay, I'm doing better than other people, or maybe you're a little anxious because you think, man, I'm not really doing what I should be doing. And this is why God gave Abraham not a contract, but a promise. You see, a contract says, if you do this for me, then I will do this other thing for you. But a promise, a covenant says, I will do this. I promise to do this. You can trust me. That's it. That's where the God of the Bible stands alone from all other religious systems, all other ways of believing, because most other religious systems say, live in this way and you will be accepted and you will earn your way. You can work your way. You can achieve godlike status. But the gospel of Jesus Christ says you can be accepted. You can be accepted. Now you can live in a different way. And Paul's not saying the law is useless. He's saying that it has a different purpose. The law is meant to drive us away from a self-reliance and drive us towards grace, meant to expose our need so that we can cling to Christ. And here's the good news. What Paul wants us to see is that Jesus is the only one who kept the law in a perfect way, and he was able to bear God's wrath, the wrath of the law, and was able to be exposed so that we could receive the promise that the law could never fully give us. What a gift. Amen.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.